Hello, I hope you are doing well. This is my presentation for my final project for BDAT 1001, Information and Coding Standards. Today we'll be looking at some ways of securing data transfers. So for the first portion of the project, I followed this series of tutorials, videos 1 through 10, from raw coding to look at authentication and authorization in C#. So let's just go take a look at some of the code. So you can see the whole project here, the whole solution. It started off with just some introductions in this basics folder. You can see I've got two projects in there, basics and identity example. And this was sort of just giving us the idea of what the project was going to be about. So after that part had finished, we moved on to OAuth. And this was really the main portion of it. And within this, there were three sections: the client, the server, and the API. So just to give a high-level overview of what's really going on here, within these three sections, client, server, and API, the client requests to access the token from the server who's holding it. So in a business situation, the server would be your company's like main database, or the thing that's holding the main database, and the client might be people who are working remotely or other companies that you're collaborating with, or whoever else, or users, or whatever that might be. And so the client uses the API to do that. The API validates the token with the server before bringing the data back to the API. So the API is kind of the bridge that connects these two things together to allow you to work with them both. Now let's start by looking at the server files. So there are a lot of similarities between some of these. They have the controllers and the views, and they also have a program and a startup CS file. The constants, this is unique to the server, and this is something that is going to be connected to by the API. We can see in the views here, this is the text that we'll see when we go to the actual website. So we've got multiple pages, a home page, and a secret page, and then an authorized page. So this is where you're kind of like a login almost. We also have a set of controllers. Controllers are really the things that are used to limit who gets access to the data, kind of as their name implies, they're controlling who can see them. So in the home controller, we've built cookies here, and we are able to see, who can access what, and you need to have the right credentials. The algorithm we used was HMAX SHA 256. This is a really common one. We also have the OAuth controller. Here, this one's quite long, pretty extensive. You can see we've got some authorization. We have our client ID and scope and state, and these are just basic things that we need. Further down, we have another iAction result, and we're creating tokens again. For this time, grant type, we have code again, client again, refresh token. And these are all going to be referencing each other. Down here we have the serialization and converting to JSON using UTF-8. And we also have the secret controller. In the client folder, we have some similarities. You can see we have a home controller again, but of course we don't have the auth or secret controller this time, because those are what we're connecting to access the data. We have views again, and because when this application is running, we want to run the API, the client, and the server all at the same time, which is why we've set it up like this for multiple startup projects. We have app settings again, of course, program CS, and a startup CS. And we have our API, which again, program and startup CS. We also have this custom authentication handler. So this is unique to the API. The client and server don't have this. And yeah, so that's going to handle custom authentications. We also have some JWT requirements in here, which will allow us to know who can access the data and who cannot. Okay, so now I have run the application and we have all three. You can see we've got three different local hosts. We have the client homepage and the server homepage, and we can navigate within these to go to the secret page or the login page or whatever else we created. Now, just moving on to answer some specific questions. Question number 1, how can we transfer personal data securely within a network? So this is a great question, and it's a really important one. Secure transfer of data is something that's essential for any company. And it's done to avoid any security breaches. And there are multiple ways to encrypt data, but the way that we used in this course, we used C#, and we can encrypt, for example, using UTF-8, although there are, of course, different methods of doing that before transferring the data. So encrypting the data before transferring it will just reduce the risk of data leaks, because you need then a key to be able to decrypt it or to deserialize it. So the data will be stored on a server and can only be accessed by clients who have the correct key. And JWT, otherwise known as JSON Web Token authentication, is a really reliable method for doing this. Second question, what security protocol is best for transferring personal files? The OAuth protocol is a great option for transferring data because it's well established, it works well, and the way it works is it's used to authorize clients who attempt to access data from your server, and it relies upon tokens to protect and safely transfer data. So it works really well hand in hand with JWT, which is what we did when we were going through the tutorial earlier today as well. Can we encode and encrypt images? The answer is yes, we can encrypt images. Everything online, not just on the internet, but on your computer, no matter what the format, eventually breaks down to zeros and ones. So anything can be encrypted, although the method might be slightly different than text. Okay, fourth question. Our database cannot be moved from the site, and we need to be able to access it externally using a secure API. Can you explain the architecture of a secure API? So, a secure API allows for communication between different computers. They are often used to access REST objects through GET requests. The GET request will receive data from your database or someone else's database, whatever you set it up to do, from a different server. So once you send the GET request, you're either going to get back the data that you're looking for, or if a problem comes up, then you'll get a response code instead. And from there, you can try to troubleshoot if it's possible from your end to try to fix the problems you're running into. A great way to work with APIs is through the app Postman. It's a great, easily accessible user interface for working with APIs. Can you recommend a secure framework for coding an API? I would recommend JWT, which is JSON Web Token Framework. And this is a really great option for coding an API because it's commonly used, it's secure, there's a lot of documentation about it online, and it's definitely a good way to keep your data safe and secure. JWT relies on tokens, as it says in the name, to make sure that unauthorized users are unable to access your data, but that those who have the correct authentication are able to do so. What data interchange format should we use while transferring data between locations? So if we're using JWT, we should definitely use JSON as our data interchange format because JWT is built off of JSON. However, if there was a different situation where you were using something else, XML is also an acceptable format. Both JSON and XML rely upon key value pairs, and they're both known for being relatively fast methods of data transfer. Next question. How should we store our data in many locations? So I broke this question into two parts. There are technical security precautions and also basic security precautions. And you want to keep both of these in mind. On the technical side, you can store your data on one main server and then access it through an API from wherever you might need to be. So this will reduce the need to keep copies on everyone's desktop, which means you're saving storage space, and you're also reducing the risk of data accidentally being left open on the computer or something like that. Another option is using a software like FileZilla. This allows you to access data from multiple locations. Now, aside from the technical security precautions, there are also some basic security precautions to keep in mind. You want to make sure that only authorized employees have access to the data. This means practicing closing your computer when you're not using it and never leaving the data open on the screen, especially when you're not around. But even if there are people who are unauthorized to see it, should not be in the same room or within easy access while you're working on it. You should also be keeping passwords on your computer and making sure that the facilities are locked up properly at night. Finally, what are the ethical concerns related to the transmission of personal data? There are some very important ethical concerns to consider whenever you're transferring data. There is a risk that you have to minimize, and companies have both a legal and moral obligation to do so. They call it the triad of security, CIA for short: confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. Which means confidentiality, it's only being accessed by people who have the authority to do so. Integrity means you're making sure that the data is true, that it's not being tampered with, and that it is also just stored in a way that there's no misunderstanding about what it means. And availability, that is that, of course, you want it to be stored safely, but you also need it to be accessible by people who need to access it. Yeah, these are important, and you have to watch out for data leaks because those can have a huge range of negative consequences, including fraud or theft, identity theft, or file tampering or deletion. So in conclusion, safe data transfer practices are essential for businesses as they have a legal and moral obligation to protect privacy of users. And they also don't want their own business plans to be accessible by outside hackers. C# allows us to use JWT and OAuth to create and access APIs for a safe and secure method of transferring data. Thank you very much for teaching this semester and for watching this presentation. Have a great rest of your day.